Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our annual Jurist in Residence lecture. I'm Michael Hussey. I'm the interim dean at Widener Law Commonwealth. This lecture and presentation is one of our signature events of our Law and Government Institute that focuses on government and administrative law. And we're quite proud of our institute and all that it does. I'm pleased to introduce Commonwealth Professor of Law and Government and Director of our Law and Government Institute, Professor Jill Family.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. It's so great to quote unquote see everyone. And we're sorry that we couldn't be together in person, but I think we're still going to have a great program and we're excited to be able to welcome you even in this virtual format. So this program is going to take place for about an hour. There will be time for questions towards the end. And when it is time for questions, we ask that you use the raise hand feature and we'll be able to see your hand raised and we will unmute individuals when it's their turn to ask a question. As Dean Hussey mentioned, the Law and Government Institute is dedicated to the study of government law, and at Widener Law Commonwealth, students may earn a certificate in law and government at graduation that provides them with hands-on experience working in government law. And we are so excited to welcome Judge Royce Morris of the Dauphin County Court of Common Pleas as our new jurist in residence. As our jurist in residence, Judge Morris will give a yearly lecture. So this is his first. There'll be another one next year. So we expect to see you all back. And in addition to giving lectures, Judge Morris is also teaching a government law colloquium to our students. And he has put together a wonderful program today to help us engage in an important discussion about the criminal justice system. After more than 25 years of distinguished service as an attorney and civic service to his community, Judge Morris was elected to serve as a judge on the Dauphin County Court of Common Pleas in 2018. Since joining the bench, Judge Morris has been assigned to run the juvenile court and receives assignments in family court, orphans court, and handles criminal trials. He began working for the Dauphin County Public Defender's Office and served as chief deputy in that office. In 1999, Judge Morris joined the law firm of Goldberg Katzman and was elevated to partner in 2002. Throughout his legal career, Judge Morris represented individuals and corporations in criminal matters and municipalities as solicitor and general counsel, often litigating complex and politically sensitive matters on behalf of those clients in county, state, and federal courts. Judge Morris received a gubernatorial appointment to serve on the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing and served on the Pennsylvania Bar Association's task force on the Code of Judicial Conduct. Judge Morris served on the House of Delegates for the Pennsylvania Bar Association and is the former chair of the Equal Professional Opportunity Committee for the Dauphin County Bar Association and the Capital Area Managing Partners Diversity Initiative. Also, Judge Morris was the president of the Pennsylvania Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. Named by Philadelphia Magazine as a Pennsylvania super lawyer from 2008 to 2017, that's a long stretch. He rated at the highest level of professional excellence, AV preeminent, by his peers at Martindale Hubbell. He is a graduate of Temple University and the University of Maryland Law School. Welcome, Judge Morris.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining this virtual event, our Jurist in Residence lecture. It's my pleasure to serve as Widener Commonwealth Law School's Jurist in Residence this year. I want to thank Dean Hussey and Jill Family, and of course, Joy and the tech folks who make events like this happen. Finally, before we get started, I would like to thank again the panelists for agreeing to participate today. They have a wealth of experience and knowledge and lengthy resumes. But in the interest of time, I will do a brief and somewhat personal introduction of each of them. so that we can get right to the very important topics that we're here to discuss this evening. Our first virtual panelist is Judge Scott Evans, my first employer at the Public Defender's Office in 1991, my mentor, my friend. He has 27 years of experience on the bench, with the majority of that being with the criminal courts. Next is Kelly Evans, who I met when I was a young lawyer, and she was an even younger, compassionate and caring probation officer in Dauphin County. She now, as the Deputy Secretary in the
Did we lose Judge Morris? He will come back.
We did.
We may have lost him. I was concerned. The county is shutting down its phone systems at 4:30 today. And I think he was at the juvenile center. And so I'm concerned that he may have lost connection because of that. I don't know. However,
Why don't we go ahead, Judge Evans, if maybe you could just introduce
and I'll take
yourself
it from
briefly.
here.
Yeah.
Sure. And when he comes back in, obviously he can come in. One of the questions that Judge Morris wanted me to answer is, what are the criminal courts doing in terms of rehabilitative needs for and keeping in mind the needs of defendants that come before us? Before I go right to what are we doing today, I think it's important that I give a historical, philosophical view of the changes that have occurred. As Judge Morris indicated, I had hired him, but I became the chief public defender in Dauphin County in 1985 and was sworn in on the bench in 1994. So I've been around a little bit. To get an idea of the changes that affect adult offenses in criminal court, it's more pronounced when you look at what happened in the juvenile system. For example, when I first was involved as an assistant public defender back in '81, the emphasis was always on the individual. What does this juvenile need to redirect their future? What can we do, although they've done an offense, what can we do to change their direction? And the assumption was that everyone can be rehabilitated. Every juvenile can be rehabilitated. In fact, the act spoke of keeping someone in the system or in placement until they were 21 years of age because of the need to help redirect the individual. Only the crime of murder was something that moved a juvenile into the adult system. Of course, that changed. And that changed whenever there was a feeling that we've got to address and protect society. We have to have the ability to transfer juveniles to the adult system for other crimes. And what would occur would be that the Commonwealth would petition to transfer a juvenile to adult court, and they would have to show that that juvenile was no longer amenable to any type of treatment or placement within the juvenile system. As time progressed, there became this more lock 'em up mentality, for lack of better phraseology, which would allow for direct files. So certain crimes, when they occur, you're filing directly that juvenile into adult court. And then the defense has to file to decertify that person back to juvenile court, showing that there's a need or amenability to treatment. So that type of philosophical change exists. The reasons that were touted was that instead of viewing the individual, there needs to be a protection for society and victims' rights. And with that was an underpinning, if you will, of a right for retribution and punishment. From that feeling that there is an overemphasis on the defendant's needs, the courts were being seen as being too lenient. And that caused the result of the legislature starting to come into the realm of the courts, which some people like me thought was unconstitutional, but I'm not on the Supreme Court and I didn't rule that way, nor would have I. But they came up with mandatory sentences. They came up with sentencing guidelines. And the reason was they were arguing for these sentencing guidelines to be followed by every judge, that a mandatory sentence had to be imposed, was under the veil of uniformity and fairness, that everyone should get the same type of sentence, even though each individual that would come before the court came from a different background, had different needs, emotionally, mentally, physically, but that was the direction we were going. The effect of that process then led to almost an over-incarceration, with more prisons being expanded, other prisons being built, and that led to a need for the spending of more and more tax dollars, and that skyrocketed. And it's been, in a sense, counterproductive. So the question of what have we done has now caused a move in the other direction of trying to unpopulate our prisons. And you're seeing that in various instances, even before COVID hit, when everyone said, well, then let's start letting some of the folks out who are nonviolent. Well, the question could then be asked, why were they there in the first place? But these are the philosophical issues that are going on. And it doesn't matter what political side that you are in this situation. From the liberal ideology, you have look, we need to identify each and every individual, help each and every individual, and save each and every individual. From a right-wing economic conservative perspective, incarcerated individuals tax government resources. However, a productive citizen adds to the tax base of all levels of government while increasing purchasing stimulus for the economy. So whether you're right-wing conservative or you're left-wing liberal, what we were doing didn't make sense, and we need to go in a different direction, which is what I believe the criminal courts have been trying to do over the last couple decades, actually. With the old Chinese proverb, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. In the late 90s, while other counties were doing drug courts, Dauphin County did not. We did not because our president judge, in my humble opinion, happened to be very antiquated and was opposed to any type of specialty court. What was created within the ARD court was a silent, hidden program called a drug court. The reason I know about it is I did it, but I didn't let anybody know about it other than the lawyers and the DA's office, so that our president judge wouldn't find out about it. After he left office, we then moved into more of, in my opinion, enlightenment, and we have our current drug court. Now, our current drug court lasts about 60 months in length. It's very tedious. It's difficult to get through. Now, historically, it was originally designed for early intervention, and however, that fell prey to the feeling that the cases needed to be resolved with convictions. Not everybody on the bench agreed with that, but that's what happened. So at times, treatment languished for months till the matter, and it still does, till the matter comes from arrest to after formal arraignment. We are, however, creating, and we're about to unveil within the next few weeks, what's called an opioid court. Now, we use the term opioid court because that gets us our funding, quite frankly. And it's going to be more cases other than just opioids, other drug substances. But the idea is to create a court that will eventually dovetail into our current drug court. The key nuance in this one is early intervention, which what was intended before. because studies have shown that the sooner you begin treatment right after arrest, the more successful you're going to be. And quite frankly, our drug court has not been as successful as it should be. Every member of the bench, we were discussing it last night, would agree that it's not where it's supposed to be. But hopefully this opioid court will work as an ability for right after arrest, police officers, public defenders, district attorneys, magistrates to be involved in getting someone into this court system, which will be more intensive and get them hopefully treatment at a quicker pace and be more successful. Our most successful specialty court is a veterans court, and it's what it is. It's veterans court. It was originally started by Judge Bratton, who was himself a Vietnam veteran. And the reasons for, I think that one is more successful than our drug court is for a number of reasons. Number one, the veterans court has more resources federally through the VA and other aspects, and gets more resource. The second thing is the participants themselves have already experienced a military structured environment during their life. So creating a structure is not difficult. Folks from the street don't necessarily have never gone through that type of structure. And so the Veterans Court has participants that are built better, I believe, for that type of structure. And thirdly, the mentors that are involved in the Veterans Court help make that a success. And that's what Judge Tully has that, and that's one of the things he has stressed. The other specialty court that we have had in the past is mental health court. And we've tried it a couple of times, and each time, quite frankly, it's failed. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is you've got to look at Dauphin County. In 2006, the governor closed down the state hospital. Those individuals that at least had a structure, that had something, were now released to the community for us to handle. No state resources were given to us to help us out. Our county was left holding the bag, so to speak, and that created part of the problem. We have a volume, and we, at the time that we were trying it, did not have the housing capabilities that we needed. We're constantly waiting for bed dates to open. A lot of times, because of the dual diagnosis of mental health plus an addictive disease, created issues where those who just wanted to handle mental health individuals would not take a dual diagnosis. And our resources were extremely limited. Like I said, we weren't getting a lot of help from the state, weren't getting a lot of help from the feds. We have since, over the last year or 2 years, created the Misa Program, which is mental illness, substance abuse, where healthcare providers, the prison itself, district attorney, public defenders, CMU are all involved in reviewing cases. We're hoping to kick off a mental health court this year. We were hoping to do it last year. COVID actually delayed a lot of things this bench wanted to take off and do under President Judge Cherry. And that's one of them. That's hopefully going to be started. And I'm told that we now have more monies, we have more resources than we did before. So hopefully the mental health court in Dauphin County will work out, but that time will tell. The other court is a reentry court, which is probably going to be something I don't want to take away from Kelly. She can explain the state's efforts there, which will undoubtedly include that. So I won't discuss that. I do want to say that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the Dauphin County commissioners, all three of them, have always been and remain supportive of rehabilitative and new means in which to create more opportunities for individuals that are coming back into society or keeping individuals from being incarcerated in the first place and create rehabilitative alternatives. There has been a change in the bench. Judge Morris is one of our newly elected judges. I call him newly elected because I've been around so long. But with the change in the bench, that we've had a number of new judges, we've had a change in philosophy, quite frankly. And in addition to what I've talked about, specialty courts and the ideological shift, quite frankly, the bench is currently reviewing a redirection of our own adult probation office. And that, again, was held up by COVID to some degree. But myself and Judge Tully will be reviewing and bringing back to the bench a redirection, if you will, of the way we're spending our resources with our own adult probation department in Dauphin County. Has Judge Morris rejoined us?
Yes, I have,
Yes,
but
he
you're
did.
doing a great job.
Well, I like when we were always on the football field, if the ball hits the ground, I'm going for it.
You got to pick it up. I appreciate that.
Judge Morris, back to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for getting us through that time. Zoom is a funny thing. I had a PFA hearing earlier, and I wish that had got kicked off the video, but that didn't happen. So, but I was finishing up on introducing Mr. Hollis, and I do want to do that because I met Mr. Hollis shortly after he was released as a juvenile lifer, and he agreed to testify in a resentencing of a juvenile lifer that I was representing. And Mr. Hollis now works to help other parolees and ex-offenders as they make the transition back into society. So I'm very thankful that all of the participants agreed to be here today. Now, I was going to, in this great intro I was going to give, talk about a number of statistics that we're all familiar with about how this country has been driven towards mass incarceration. Back in 1972, there were 200,000 people incarcerated in the US. That number jumped up to about 2.3 million in 2018, and that number stays around 2.1 million today. Every day or every year in this country, about 600,000 people get released from prisons and jails. There's 840,000 people on parole in this country. There are 3.6 million people on probation. And the US criminal justice system controls almost 7 million people. And that's according to the Prison Policy Initiative. Mass incarceration is a uniquely American thing. We lead the world in that. And because of that, it's become a civil rights issue. Many people argue that incarceration dehumanizes poor and minority populations and does not measurably increase public safety, but instead continues to damage marginalized communities. And as I think is clear from what some of the things that Judge Evans may have said, we have a number of people that come in front of the court system, and a number of those people are sentenced, but we know that eventually those people are going to be released. And some of them are going to be released into an uncertain future. About 600,000 or more people will be released from jails and prisons this year. So how do they find their way back into society? That's what I hope we could talk about today. The statistics show that 5 out of 6 state prisoners will be rearrested within 9 years of their release. 68% of that number will be rearrested within 3 years of their release. So those numbers don't lie. So the question that I was going to ask today, and I think our panelists are equipped to answer, is how are we giving those people a second chance? And Judge Evans started us off very well. If there's anything else he'd like to say, I'll give him the floor. Otherwise, we could move to Ms. Evans. Judge Evans?
Well, I will make one concluding remark. Right? The frustration I've seen over the years is the, at times, lack of commitment of resources to the rehabilitative needs of individuals. One of the toughest situations is the young men, young women I see coming out of, whether it be Dauphin County Prison or from the state, and the employment is not there. Now they have a prior record, which makes it even more difficult to get employment. And my hope is that when we redirect our adult probation office, my hope is that our court will be able to go back to our commissioners and come up with some sort of aid in getting employment and allowing an employment record to exist for an individual so that they can take that and get future employment elsewhere and continue to promote themselves. I see employment and housing as two major concerns, because our other problem in the housing area is with a prior record, certain federal housing is unavailable. Well, that doesn't help us. And so I think we need to look at the entire picture, not just our little, did you do everything you were supposed to do as a condition of probation parole? Now I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Evans, as sort of our representative of the Commonwealth today, how is the state doing in helping individuals make a transition back into society?
Well, thank you, Judge Morris, for the opportunity to be here. And everything that Judge Evans and that you spoke about is everything that I'm going to speak about today. Basically, reentry doesn't happen in a vacuum. At the state, we do have a lot of resources, but we can't do it alone. You know, we rely on our community partners, our sister agencies, because the individuals that come to our system, they have a multitude of needs. And we can't just focus on one area and expect good results. We need to look at treating the whole person. And we often hear reentry starts on day one, and it does. But we need, if we really want to have an impact, we need to get them before they come to our system. And Judge Evans touched on that. You know, our state system has been blessed to have Secretary Wetzel as our leader. And early on, he began talking about the importance of early childhood education, pre-K programs, and many question like, why is the Secretary of Corrections talking about early childhood education? But educating our children is, you know, one of the best ways to fight crime and decrease the likelihood of them ending up in our criminal justice systems. So a couple of years ago, we partnered with OCDEL, which is the Office of Childhood Development and Early Learning. And it was a collaborative effort between the Department of Education, Department of Human Services, and we did statewide trainings to educate our staff on the importance of early childhood education, with the idea that our staff are the ones going into the homes and they're dealing with the parents of these children. And that we thought that's one way of breaking that cycle and, you know, helping them to be successful and not enter our system in the first place. And an interesting statistics, 40% of individuals coming into our state system do not have a high school diploma. So it's all about breaking that cycle, giving children the opportunity for a good education. That's a pathway to success. Another staggering statistic is about 30% of our inmates suffer from a mental illness. So we received some grant funding and we partnered with some local police departments, and we trained our staff and police officers in crisis intervention team training. And the premise is it gives the officers and agents a foundation so that when they're dealing with someone who's experiencing a mental health crisis, the answer isn't always like take them to prison. The answer is getting the individual the help that they need before they come to our system. I mean, it's diversion on the front end, whether it be the mental health system, the drug and alcohol system. If we can stop someone from coming into our system and give them the services that they need, you know, it's a move in the right direction. So Judge Evans, or I'm sorry, Judge Morris, you also asked me to touch on some legislation that has impacted how we do business at the state level. So as both of you alluded to, the population of our prisons exploded in the 90s, early 2000s. It was unsustainable. So the legislature passed Justice Reinvestment Initiative. It was Act 122 that was passed in 2012. And that law basically put caps on how long of length of incarceration that inmates could do when they come back on technical parole violations. So for the first parole violation, they could only do a maximum of 6 months, second 9 months, and then third and subsequent rearrest and recommitments, they could only do a maximum of 12 months. So the overarching idea is, you know, keep people in the community, give them treatment in the community, keep that money in the community, and invest at the local level. We all know individuals do better when they're at home with their family support than they do when they're put in state prison. The other piece of legislation that was recently passed in December of 2019 was Justice Reinvestment Part 2. And without going into too much detail, the ultimate goal of JRI 2 was to offer cost-effective method of incarceration to those who are most likely to benefit from it. So our low-level, non-violent inmates. And basically, it's get them in, give them the treatment that they need, and get them out. And there were three main programs under this legislation. It was State Drug Treatment Program, which was formerly the State Intermediate Punishment, very high level. The courts no longer have to sentence the individual to the program. They come into our system, the DOC assesses them, their treatment needs, and if they deem them appropriate for that program, they go into the program. If they fail at any time during that program, rather than going back to the original sentencing judge for revocation, they just revert back to serving their original sentence. And then boot camp was another program under JRI 2. And under previously, an individual had to be sentenced to boot camp. The court had to deem them eligible for boot camp. Under JRI 2, unless the court specifically deems the individual ineligible, it's presumed that the individual is eligible. If they're assessed when they come in by our staff to be appropriate for that program, they're put into that program. And the third one that I mentioned is short sentence parole. And that is for an individual. They must have a minimum of 2 years or less on their sentence. It must be crime of nonviolence, no personal injury. If they're reviewed and deemed eligible for that program, they no longer have to be interviewed by the parole board. It's an automatic parole. So those are some high level things on the legislation. As far as what we're doing within our prison system to prepare people for release, it's constantly changing. Secretary Wetzel is one of our nation's leaders when it comes to corrections and criminal justice. And he is constantly saying, we're not status quo. You know, if we're doing something and we're not getting good outcomes, we're going to change it. If we're doing something and it doesn't make sense, we're changing it. So what I'm about to tell you with things that we're doing now, this is what we're doing today. Tomorrow, it could be different, but we're doing a lot of things. And the idea is to make individuals better. When they come into our system, we're meeting them where they are and addressing every need that we possibly can so that when they come out, they're better on the back end. So prior to the COVID pandemic, we were discussing our TPVs, our technical parole violators. That's a population that we typically don't get good outcomes with. It's the revolving door. They're in, they're out, they're in, they're out. And so we sat down, what can we do better? So as a result of COVID, we were forced to, do things to mitigate the spread. So what we did was we developed reception sites for our technical parole violators, and we created a program where we are going to address their needs as soon as they come in. We developed this program in conjunction with Dr. Christian Conti. He's the author of Yield Theory. And it's a self-assessment, emphasis on personal growth, mastering what they practice. And, it's the whole continuum of reentry planning, continuity of care. So initially, we started this program in June, and we had 2 reception sites. They were SCI Cole and SCI Green. We recently changed that. We have 1 reception site for the entire system now. It's at SCI Smithfield. So any individual entering our system will enter through SCI Smithfield, whether they're a parole violator or a new commitment from the county, and they are all given this program. So the hope is that we can get them before they get too far ingrained in what's happening in our state prison system. Unfortunately, there are things that we can't control, but like I said, we're trying to change anything that we can do better. That's what we do. So now the first phase of the program is 21 days. The inmates are able to do it in their cell. And it coincides with the 21-day quarantine. So hopefully at the end of 21 days, they'll be cleared by medical and they'll be on to their next phase if they're going to the TPV facilities, which are still Cole and Green for phase 2 through 4. And the other inmates, the new commits, will go to SCI Camp Hill, where they'll go through diagnostics and classification. Another thing that we're doing for anyone that enters our system, we're working on creating a welcome to the DOC video, which I thought was kind of cool. It's basically like the do's and don'ts of being successful while they're coming into our system and serving our time. There's a lot of anxiety with individuals when they're coming in. They don't know what to expect, and sometimes they get sucked into the negativity. So we're just going to try to head that off at the door. In all of our institutions, we have social workers, reentry parole agents. We have reentry service offices in every SCI. And the idea is, you know, one-stop shop. They can go there when they're planning for their release. They go there, they can get information on any community that they're releasing to. They can sign up for workshops, life skills, cognitive behavior, renters prep. We're in the process of developing a workshop that's geared towards releasing to the community during the pandemic and what inmates should expect. We're also developing a new assessment tool. Currently, we have a lot of different assessments, which, you know, they don't talk to one another. They're in silos. Nothing's connected. We don't have one case management system. So this new case management system is supposed to be state of the art. It will do the assessment when someone comes in, follow them the entire way through the system onto community supervision and until they're released to when they max out. And the idea is to provide better continuity of care and get better outcomes. So we've also partnered with the Department of Banking to provide financial literacy to our inmates, teach them the importance of having a checking account, a savings account, the importance of having good credit when they get out. We've partnered with other agencies and have MOUs in place with the Social Security Administration, PennDOT, Department of Human Services. You know, we want to get them their identification, their birth certificate before they release, so that when they're getting out, applying for jobs, anything like that, those things are important. We've also partnered with the Department of Human Services in regards to medical assistance. We all know the importance of having insurance. And when we're releasing individuals, like many of our individuals have mental health needs, they have serious medical conditions, or they're, you know, they suffer from alcohol or opioid use disorder and they're on an MAT. So we realized it's important to continue. We offer Vivitrol to every inmate prior to release, where we just recently started Suboxone maintenance. If they're coming from the county and they're on Suboxone, we will continue them on that medication. We're in the process of hopefully starting Sublocade injections very soon. And the idea is continuity of care, like meet these individuals where they are and, you know, do anything that we can, treat the whole person in hopes of making them successful when they come out. 75% of our inmates struggle with addiction. In every one of our institutions, we have therapeutic communities, and that is the equivalent of an inpatient alcohol and drug program in the community. We place a huge emphasis on education. Like I said before, that is the key to breaking the cycle and, you know, helping people succeed. If someone comes to us and they don't have a high school diploma or a GED, education is a mandatory program. And I'm quite proud to say that our GED pass rate is higher than in the community. In 2019, we had 541 inmates receive their GED. Now in 2020, our numbers decreased, unfortunately, because of COVID, but I anticipate those will rise again. We have 30 different vocational educational programs. They range from barber school, automotive mechanic, cosmetology, plumbing, just to name a few. We have veteran service units in 5 out of our 24 institutions, and they assist veterans while they're on the inside, you know, get them hooked up for services. And that continues as they go through the release process, and we get them connected when they're on the outside. And typically, like Judge Evans said, when our inmates are releasing, their concerns are housing and employment. that's what they're most worried about. That's what they have the most anxiety about. We have a workforce development coordinator, and basically we call her our matchmaker. She meets daily with multiple employers and gets them connected with reentrants. And, she basically markets our reentrants to these employers and gives them the benefits of hiring those with a criminal record. We hold yearly reentry job fairs where we bring employers in, community service providers come in, and for those inmates that are in the release process, we put them through job interviews and do everything we can to get them hooked up with an employer prior to release. And then on the outside in the community, we have community reentry parole agents. The first thing that they do after an inmate's release, they hold a new release orientation. They assess for basic needs. Like, we all understand, if their basic needs, housing, food, clothing, employment, if those are not met, we can't get them to focus on anything else. That is going to be their main focus. So we try to ensure everyone's basic needs are met upon release. We have the Bureau of Community Corrections. We have community service providers that we contract with for workforce development, mental health, mentoring, batterers, housing, sex offenders. And it's basically, we're contracted with them, and if there's a service that is needed, we refer our reentrants to those programs upon release. And Judge Evans also touched on housing. Like, that is a huge struggle for us. We use our Bureau of Community Corrections for housing, our halfway houses and our centers, but that is not long-term, stable, affordable housing. And that's really an area that we continue to struggle. We have programs that we use, but we don't really have a firm foundation on that. So those are just a few of the things that we're doing at the state to prepare people for release, because we know that 95% of our inmates are coming out. They're going to be our neighbors. So the idea is, we need to, while they're with us, it's a prime opportunity to do what we can and make them better. And a lot of our inmates have been with us for a very long time. So it's starting at ground zero and building them up and, preparing them for what they're about to release into. And things oftentimes are much, much different than when they went in. So, but one thing I would say, and this goes along with what Judge Evans said, we need to really focus on locking up those individuals that we are afraid of, not those that we're mad at. Like, I heard someone say that not too long ago, and that really stuck with me, because there's a lot of truth to that. So I thank you, Judge Morris, for the opportunity to participate in your program today, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much. And that was some great information that we have from the state perspective. Mr. Karhnak, I know that you represent federal probation, and there are a number of things that are going on the federal level to help reintegrate folks back into society as well. So now you have the floor, and please share that with us.
So, like the state, reentry does start on the first day of incarceration in the federal system. But, not getting to that point is the goal of the system. If we can, educate people and give them the opportunities prior to them getting in trouble, then we can, hopefully find that they're not in the system. However, for the individuals that do make it into the federal system, the Federal Bureau of Prisons right now, it looks like it has 152,034 inmates. So when they come in the door of the institution, they have their orientation and different classes like that, but they also meet with a federal case manager, and those case managers are involved with them, making sure their needs are met, addressing any program that they need, education, drug and alcohol, mental health, substance abuse, any kind of treatment that they might have. With that being said, there's also trades that people incarcerated learn. They can get college degrees. Each institution has their own set of programs that a person can attend. In addition, then they also have the ability to transfer to another institution where those programs that they might be interested are offered. They use assessments there. There's multiple ones that the case managers use to assess, as far as cognitions. There's residential drug and alcohol treatment programs, which is a 500-hour residential therapeutic community that allows them to get time off their sentence if they complete, if they don't have an offense that involves a firearm or violence. As a part of that, the First Step Back right now, because of COVID, a lot of things have changed. So I see a lot of people getting, getting released early through compassionate release motions. They might be elderly clients. They might be clients that have some sort of medical condition that would, they'd need to be, segregated in the community where they're not out exposing themselves with, risk factors. So then we also there's a federal location monitoring program where individuals, either first-time offenders or individuals that have these risk factors, they can come home early and be on location monitoring or home detention that us federal probation officers supervise. So then getting to their release planning starts about 2 years prior to them actually getting released from prison. At that point, the case manager would reach out to the federal probation officer with a release plan in the area that the client or reentrant will be releasing to, and we'll investigate that. We'll make sure it's a legitimate plan. We'll also identify any needs that might be met. For instance, I've had some elderly reentrants that needed to have oxygen when they got home from prison, so we had to coordinate how getting a delivery of oxygen tanks for him when he released that day. Those are the types of things that we're looking at. We're also looking at what they need, as far as, are they going to be homeless? Do they have family that can be reliable for them to get back into the community? So at that point, we'll identify any of their needs and relay that back to the case manager, and then they'll start addressing them. And then typically about 9 months prior to release, reentrants will go from the prison to a reentry center or a residential reentry center. People know them as halfway houses. And then at the halfway house, they will be able to, the reentrants be able to work in the community, attend programming such as substance abuse, mental health, sex offender treatment programs. And also they'll have the ability to have home passes to go visit with their families or to the home that they're at. With COVID, there's been an increase in home detention to try and mitigate some of the numbers that we have at our halfway houses and prisons. At the same time, then when these reentrants, when they finish with the halfway house, typically on the date of their release from the Bureau of Prisons, they'll come to the federal probation office. We'll meet with them and assess their needs. At that point, we have a good idea usually of where they're going to be living and some of the issues that they might have. But our focus at that point is we give them a post-conviction risk assessment, which allows us to identify any criminal thinking patterns, and also gives us a guidance on how we should supervise that person, how often they should be seen. For instance, low-risk offenders, it'll start off intensive, but then we'll reduce the amount of supervision so that we're not overbearing on them. They might not have as much needs, and allows us to focus with individuals that need that intensive supervision and interventions. Our system and the federal probation system is focused on evidence-based practices. So we're looking at research and then developing ways to help people. One of those is this STAR program, staff training aimed at reducing rearrest. And what we do is we teach probation officers cognitive behavioral interventions that we can use with our reentrants. Along with that, then we use those skills when we're working with the reentrants or the clients. We'll reinforce positive behaviors. We'll disapprove of negative behaviors. We'll teach them how to problem solve. Instead of picking up the phone to call their probation officer, we teach them how to work through brainstorming and different options so that when they leave us, they have the ability to be successful. Like I said, the first 6 months is important because if somebody's going to end up getting rearrested or go back to prison on a technical violation, it's going to be within that first 6 to, I'd say, 18 months. But the first 6 months, we need to make sure that they have housing, employment, and any kind of treatment we need to address. With that being understood, we have one program that's really important, at least in my office in Harrisburg. It's called the CARE Court program. It's a court-assisted reentry program. What we are is a problem-solving court. This was started in 2009 by then Chief Judge Yvette Kane. The Honorable Judge Kane and Judge Van Aske up in Scranton realized that we needed a way to help individuals just getting home from prison. So what it is it's a 4-stage reentry court program, kind of modeled on the drug court type system. We have 4 phases. In each of the Harrisburg, Williamsport, and Scranton offices, we have a federal judge assigned to the program, 2 prosecutors, 2 public defenders, and 2 probation officers. We assign our participants in that program community mentors, and that's a key part of our program. So in Harrisburg, we recruit mentors from the Harrisburg Rotary, and we assign typically two of those mentors to each participant, and it's been extremely successful because they have the means and resources that we don't as probation officers. Currently in Harrisburg, we had 43 graduates just since 2009. We typically only keep about 5 to 10, at most 12 people at a time in the program, just so we can focus on them and give them the attention they need. With all that being said, we have contracts for mental health providers, sex offender treatment providers, substance abuse, mental health. One of the struggles that I've seen, especially during COVID, is the housing situation. We've had landlords getting, they can't evict their tenants. And so that's hurt some of our people that are reentering the community and trying to secure a place to live because they just can't afford the substantial down payments they're asking for. So that's pretty much an overview of what we're doing here. We don't have as many of the programs per se, but the probation officers in the federal system are working and assessing. We're using our community organizations and any resources that we can find to help the individual be successful.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
want to thank
Karhnak.
Judge Morris.
Thank you so much. And now we're going to turn to Mr. Hollis so that we can try to get some time. He has a very personal and unique perspective. He's a young man who spent, I guess, the better part of his young adult life and his early middle age, I'll say, life in prison. And when he was released, he went on to make the successful transition back into society. And now he helps ex-offenders and parolees. So I think his perspective is very unique and I think important for us to hear today. So Mr. Hollis, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Judge Morris, for the opportunity, and thank Widener College for setting this platform up. Coming from the inner city of Philadelphia, which is where I grew up at, I was a gang member and got caught up in a lot of crazy things. So I went to prison at 16. I came home at 58. And I was blessed to have a wife who could help me readjust to life on this side. Because I went from sleeping in a cell alone to sleeping in a bedroom with a wife. And there were a lot of challenges that while I thought I was being well equipped while incarcerated, because as Ms. Evans said, education is key to having a successful reentry. There were things that I didn't know from a vocational standpoint. Academically, I was pretty good, but vocationally, I thought I was good, but there were a lot of things that I didn't know. I was woefully prepared with this side of society. However, people gave me opportunity. They gave me chances to prove myself, to put in the work more or less. And one of the things that I learned while in prison was that successful people do what unsuccessful people don't like to do. All of you are successful in your field because you put in the work. As a 16-year-old kid, I wasn't interested in putting in the work. I wanted results, that immediate gratification. But I learned that it was important to put in the work because then you can be successful and not find yourself locked in a cell So that has really been my motto, is putting in the work so that I can be successful. And I try to stress that to the people that I help. As Judge Morris said, I work for Sound Community Solutions. We're an organization that mentor men and women that are returning to their communities. We also have a DDAP license to help people who are addicted to get into the proper treatments that they need for their addictions. We facilitate batterers intervention groups, anger management. And it's important to me to see people come out and re-engage life with a different thought process. One of the things I used to always say, if you think the way you've always thought, you always get what you always got. If you always get what you've always got, you always think what you've always thought. And unfortunately, that's how many people think. They never change their way of thinking, so they're always reoffending, they're always going back. And the question I ask guys when I talk to them is, where are you going back to? What are you going back to? Because the guy that we were has already showed us what he's about. That's why we were in prison. So if I'm going back to the Doug House that I was prior to incarceration, guess what? I'm going back to incarceration. So it's important for people to change their thought process, because that helps. That helps to change the paradigms that we have. And until we change those paradigms, prison is going to be our outcomes. So it's important for me to make sure that guys know that their success is in large part due to their thinking process, if they can change it. And then if they can stick to the principles of change, which is constantly working, because it's not an easy process. You have to continually work to better who you are, to invest in other people, and to invest in self. The greatest investment I ever made while incarcerated was in self. And it has been the greatest tool that I have to offer people, is that knowledge that if you put in the work, you can be successful. So working where I do gives me an opportunity to give back, not only to the men and women that are incarcerated, but to society. Because I owe a debt to society, not a financial debt, but I owe a debt to society. My life's mission is to make life better for the people on this side, because so many of us have offended society. That's why we were in prison. Now I come out, and my whole objective is to do better, to make life better on both sides, if that's possible. So I continually try to make that a reality for people. I can't change the things that I did as a 16-year-old child that led to my incarceration. But the one thing that I could change was me. And I've tried to use that as a catapult to do better, as a way to somehow make amends, which is impossible. You can never make amends for murder, but you can always try to give back. You can always try to do better. And that's the kind of person that I'd like to be, and the kind of things I'd like to instill in other people who are coming out of the system. As Ms. Evans mentioned, the educational process in prison has really gone under, I'd say, is a renewed effort to make sure that men and women are better equipped to return to society. You know, when I first went to prison, rehabilitation was a major function. But as time went on, it became less and less important. But Secretary Wetzel has made it something that is important for men and women to do better, to get that GED, to get some form of post-secondary education, some vocational skill. That hasn't always been the thrust of incarceration. For a while there, it was about punishment. Now it's about getting people ready to return to their communities. And we need to have people better equipped to return to society so that they can give in a productive way, so that they can be tax-paying citizens. So to me, that was a very important change from an administrative posture to invest in the people who are incarcerated so that when they come out here, they can give back to their societies. They can give back to their communities and do better and live a good life according to the laws. One of the challenges that I faced was employment. I tell people all the time, I had an apprenticeship in building maintenance, service, or repair. And I came home and I interviewed for a job at MI Windows and Doors here in Millersburg. And when I got the job, I realized that I didn't have the skills. I didn't know anything about repairing machinery. One guy asked me to get him a nut drive. I didn't know what it was. But here I had this apprenticeship as in building maintenance, service, or repair. So I realized that a lot of the things that we learn in prison is antiquated, but the basics of what you need to live right and to do better is there for you if you take it. Everyone's not situated like me. They don't have a wife or a support system that will help you get through the rough spots. But I believe if you apply yourself and you're unafraid to ask for help, that's the real key. Being humble enough to say, I need help. I think that help is there. A lot of guys fight parole and they say how difficult parole is. But I'll be honest with you, in my 4 years, I have not had any problems with parole because I don't do anything. I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't run the streets. So I don't really have a lot of the vices that men have, but I found that if you do the thing that parole asks, parole does everything in their power to assist you in making it out here. But you have to be willing to make the changes that are necessary to sustain your liberties as a free person. So I just thank God for all the assistance and the help that I've been given by a lot of people. I couldn't get here alone. There's a lot of people and I couldn't sit here and name all of them off one at a time because it's just impossible. But I will give a lot of props and credits to former Deputy Secretary of Corrections, William Love. He was very instrumental in my, I'd say, growth and maturity in my early years of incarceration. So, and I'm thankful to so many people. My wife, she waited 35 years for me to come home. How many women do that? So obviously she saw something that I didn't see, but I'm thankful that she's here and for all the assistance and support that she's given me in my transition.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Hollis. And we're a little over time, but I know if there are some questions, certainly can ask those. I'm very thankful for all the panelists, and I'm thankful for all of you that stayed on the line despite the technical difficulties. I got kicked off again. So Mr. Hollis, I missed the first part, but I know you were eloquent and said the things that we needed to hear. So and I apologize for the technical difficulties that we had, but I see there's a couple hands raised, so I'll let the technical people handle that.
Yeah, it looks like we have a question from Lori.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, everyone that initiated this Zoom meeting, and I'm so pleased to be a part of it. And I want to just quickly say that I am a parent of a recovering addict who spent time in Dauphin County Prison, and I will say that I was not impressed with the treatment once my child was in work release. And I contacted our commissioners on many occasions several years ago. They got tired of hearing from me. They would not respond to my calls. And so that led them to introduce me to the Pennsylvania Prison Society. And so I joined, and I attended their monthly meetings. I attended the board meetings at the Dauphin County Prison, the friends and family meetings, and I could go on and on. However, one of the things that I've tried to do was get more involved in my community. So I'm on my second term as a committee member, and in Middletown Borough. And I've talked to a lot of lawmakers and attended meetings, a meeting at the Capitol Rotunda a few years ago. I find that, you know, when they're running for election, you know, they're all gung-ho to hear what you have to say. And then once they're elected, they don't care anymore. Nothing is being done and you never hear from them. So one of the things that I have asked repeatedly is why the cost and fines continue, because it's just more punishment on top of these people who were incarcerated, and they can't find jobs to begin with. They can't find housing. And then we pile thousands upon thousands of dollars in cost and fines. And then we put them back in jail when they can't pay those cost and fines. So, you know, I'd like to see something done about this terminated. It's ridiculous. I left my job. I am a retired school teacher. I left my job to raise a grandchild. I also am very proud of my child who was incarcerated, because they're now on their feet and they're doing very well. But I can't say it was the help of anyone in this county, in Dauphin County. I think that there were many agencies that just seems like they worked against people that are having difficulty. And I just would love to see somebody out there implement or terminate this cost and fines. And I also want to say that
Well, maybe we can get an answer to the costs and fines issue first, since we are running a little bit over. Does one of the panelists want to take that issue on?
Thank you.
I can if you want me to. I had revocations today, and out of my revocations, I don't think I hit double digits, but there were a number of individuals who had been on supervision, had been revoked for a couple of times just for fines and costs. I made a ruling that they paid to the best of their financial ability. They followed all, and as long as they had no other technicals, what I did was I struck all amounts due and owing, terminated supervision, and closed the dockets. I've been criticized for that because there's a number of people that believe that the court system should be paid for by those who are using it, which they call that the criminal defendant. I have found that when you have individuals who are struggling to try to get back on their feet, a couple of the individuals had gone through treatment. I don't know what your son's status is, and I'm not going to ask that, nor should I address it. But there were individuals who were on a supervision period, and because they were in inpatient counseling and then were on intensive outpatient, had done everything that was asked of them, but financially they couldn't pay. For those who put forth that effort of the inpatient successfully completed and had done so well, I tend to concur that there's no reason to keep people down. A lot of times, however, some of the instances people are kept on is because there's restitution, because someone is owed money and they need to be, the victim needs to be made whole. So that's a little different. You're talking an addiction, and if someone has in fact proven themselves, can they get out from underneath? Yes. I understand your concern because there was a great emphasis a couple of years ago to have a fines and costs court and have individuals sign that they'll pay so much. And if they don't, to hold them in contempt for not paying. I would not participate in that as a judge. Not everyone did. I felt that that was, number one, unconstitutional, and number two, self-defeating. I'd much rather have someone succeed and, quite frankly, pay taxes when they get on their feet than keep them down for years and years that they can't get out from underneath. And we keep throwing them in jail. And when we throw them in jail, they lose their job. It's a cycle that at times the judiciary has created for itself. It also doesn't help whenever individuals are saying, well, the budget, departments were taking credit for collecting monies as if they were earning it for the county and for the commissioners. There's a fallacy to that. One of the items that is being reviewed right now is at what level do we do an assessment instead of sending individuals even to monetary compliance? At what point do we say, you know what, we're wasting money holding people down and we need to end it. And we need to be a positive influence rather than a negative. Lori, I don't know about your specific situation. I agree with you. I think it's something that needs to be addressed. And as I made a comment earlier, I am so very happy with our current bench and the direction we're going because I think you're right. And we need to address that. And that's something the court needs to do, not necessarily the state. And while I have the floor before I lose it, I do want to say one thing, and that's to not only to Kelly, but to everyone who's a participant here. We in Pennsylvania are extremely lucky to have John Wetzel, a part of our state government. He has spoken out against mandatory sentencing whenever it was not popular to do so. He has not always taken the popular position, but he has always been very progressive in what he has proposed that the state follow, and the state has not always listened to John Wetzel. I believe our Commonwealth is well served by him, and we would have been better served had we listened to him. So for whatever that's worth, I do want to give some kudos to Secretary Wetzel. Thank you, Laura.
So Judge Morris, you want to have some concluding remarks? I see there is one more question. Why don't we have Judge Morris give us some concluding remarks, and then if people need to go, they could go, and the one person who still has a question could hang on, and I'm sure the speakers will hang on for an extra minute or two.
Yeah, we'll be willing to stay around for an extra minute or two. And I just wanted to say thank you to all the panelists. Thank you for everyone that participated today. Thank you for everyone putting up with the technical difficulties. I only got kicked off 3 times, but I'm back now, and thankful that we were able to have this dialogue and talk about this very important issue. The numbers are alarming in terms of folks that are getting out, folks that are subject to reentry type services and need those services. And it sounds like, at least in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we're moving in the right direction. So I want to thank everyone for participating today. And this has been a great first lecture, and we look forward to the next one next year, hopefully live and in person, so we don't have to worry about the Zoom monsters getting us. So thanks, everyone. And I'll stay around, and I'm sure Judge Evans will stay around as well if anyone has a question or two.
Michelle, did you have a question?
Yes, I actually have quite a few questions for several of the panelists. So Professor Family, I was wondering if we would receive email addresses so we could do that at another time instead of taking everybody's time at this late hour.
I would say that's up to the panelists. What do you think, panelists?
I can speak for myself, and I would not mind an email, so you can certainly give my email address. And I know most of those other individuals are publicly accessible because of the roles they're in. So if you have a question for someone that's been on the panel, you can certainly reach them at their professional offices.
All right. Well, thank everyone again so much for coming, and we look forward to another lecture next year.